And we have a wonderful guest with us today, Jim Ferrell. He is a best-selling author, has sold millions of copies on books on leadership development and personal development, leadership and self-deception, incredible book, and The Anatomy of Peace. And he has a new book coming out called You and We.
Every time when I've come up against a hard situation interpersonally with people or organizationally with folks, when I start to turn the dial to a relational view into that situation rather than individualistic one, all of a sudden the thing opens up. Let's imagine, for example, that Ben, you and I, let's say that we are hydrogen atoms, and Kaylee, you're an oxygen atom. And look, the world needs oxygen. You can just keep being an oxygen atom. That's perfectly fine. And the world needs hydrogen, and we can keep doing that. That's fine too. But if all we do is all the hydrogen hangs out with the hydrogen and all the oxygen hangs out with the oxygen, there's no water. Okay. But when you have two of us, two hydrogens get together with an oxygen atom, and we open ourselves to each other. Now there's a chemical way that this happens. All of a sudden, this conjoining of differences gives birth to this entirely new thing. Over the last 100 years, I would say the most important discovery in science, by far, is the discovery that we're never seeing or measuring things that are independent of ourselves. All we're ever measuring or seeing is our own interactions with what it is we're observing. That's it.
Okay, and welcome to another episode of the Longevity Lounge. My name is Ben.
And I'm Kaylee.
And we have a wonderful guest with us today, Jim Ferrell. He is a best-selling author, has sold millions of copies on books on leadership development and personal development, leadership and self-deception, incredible book, and The Anatomy of Peace. And he has a new book coming out called You and We. And we're excited to jump into that and what that represents in terms of how we can really change ourselves, improve our relationships, both personally and in our business environments too.
Yeah, Jim's the best. You guys are going to love this episode. Let's dive in.
Okay, Jim, we are so excited to be with you today, and I've been chomping at the bit for this one. I've read every single one of your books. I've got all of them on my bookshelf, and certainly a couple of my big favorites, Leadership and Self-Deception and The Anatomy of Peace, two phenomenal books. And of course, I think, Kaylee, this was one of the first books that you read, Leadership and Self-Deception. Is that right?
It was, yeah. Funny enough, Leadership and Self-Deception, Jim, was the very first book I read in my career. My first job out of college, we had an office book club. And probably 2 weeks after I started, I was handed your book, read it, loved it. And since then, I've listened on Audible a couple of times. It's a good refresher. It has so many good nuggets in there.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's great.
Okay, now you've literally sold millions of copies of your books, and this has really set you up, I believe, as a world leader on leadership development. You've consulted with brands all over the world, and you've really helped galvanize teams, kind of brought them together, developed leadership qualities, seen where they're going wrong, really helped piece it back together. Because, of course, at the heart of any great business is great people, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And you've got a new book coming out, You and We, which we're really excited about.
I just got my author copies right here.
Awesome.
Just came in on Friday. Yeah, really, really stoked. When they come in, you never know. I mean, there's so much work that goes into a book, not just the writing of it, but also the design of it, what the title's going to be, what the subtitle's going to be, how it's going to look when it's actually printed. And when it all comes together, it's kind of exciting. So that was fun to get those.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. And how long, Jim, if you don't mind me asking, how long did it take you to write that?
Started in a way, I've been writing it all my life, in a way, it's all prep. But in terms of the actual writing, I started at the beginning of let's see, what year are we in? It's 2025. So I started in basically January 1st, 2024, and then submitted the final to the publisher around like November 1st or something. So it was about a 10-month write. And then you're not quite done then. I mean, you turn it in, but you're still working on things. You're just honing it right down to the last second. In fact, I had a friend just read You and We just, in fact, I might tell the story later. It's sort of an interesting story because she figures in the book. But she says, I found a typo. So she just, yesterday, I found a typo. And it's in one of the footnotes. There's one typo in a footnote in the back of the book. No one will ever see it. She says, otherwise it's totally pristine. So, that's pretty great too when you get that news.
Well, you know what? I mean, that's eyes like an eagle, right?
Yeah. Well, now everyone knows, Jim.
They'll hunt for it in all the footnotes. One letter. Isn't one letter's left out?
Yeah, well, I love the philosophy of this book. And, I've heard it said ages ago that people join companies but then leave people, right? So much of our success, I think, in leadership and in running organizations, managing teams, in our personal relationships, really comes down to how we govern ourselves and also how much we interact with others, how that comes about. And your book, You and We, it doesn't just break this down, it kind of breaks the whole thing open. It completely revolutionizes this, in my opinion, this whole concept of relational existence. Now, you mentioned that this book is something that you've been in the writing for years, right? It's because of your lived experience. What was your aha moment that gave you the epiphany to begin with this?
Well, in terms of viewing things relationally as opposed to individualistically, that level, I'm not sure there's a single aha moment on that. It's just accumulating the experience over life and coming up both in my personal life and my professional life against situations where tackling them the normal ways, I'd always just sort of go, it just didn't work. And trying to get inside of why that is. What's missing? Is there anything a little bit off? In fact, I'll give you sort of an interesting sort of sidebar to this that applies to your question. I've come to know here recently just a wonderful guy. He's the head of humanities up at Johns Hopkins University. And I read one of his books, which is just brilliant. It's called The Rigor of Angels. It's a beautiful book. And so Bill Egginton's his name. So Bill and I were just in a conversation, and he and I too both kind of geek out over quantum physics. We're sort of on the side, right? We both get into that. And one of the things that's become clear over the last century, well, there's all this weirdness about quantum mechanics. If anyone's ever read or studied about it, it's kind of a really bizarre world where it seems like the normal rules don't apply. But it turns out what actually is being suggested by quantum physics is that everything is relational. That's why it seems like it's weird, because we're not normally thinking relationally. We're thinking individualistically. We're thinking in terms of me and in terms of you, and not thinking in terms of the intersection between us. And when you start, and what Bill said, he says, what's interesting when they started to, people dive into the relational understanding of the quantum realm, all of a sudden everything started to fall into place and made sense. But not only about the quantum realm, it also makes sense for us. And that's my experience is every time when I've come up against a hard situation interpersonally with people or organizationally with folks, when I start to turn the dial to a relational view into that situation rather than individualistic one, all of a sudden the thing opens up and there's completely new clarity. So I had that experience over and over and over and over, and eventually learned to sort of pay attention to that and dive into and understand what's actually going on here. What does it mean? Because I actually thought I was always kind of a relational person, even in the stuff I wrote before, like in the earlier books you mentioned. I thought it was sort of relational, but actually in very foundational ways, even that work wasn't yet relational. Not in the way we talk about it. We're thinking about it in my company. My new company is called Withy Leadership. So anyway, that's sort of that's not a one eureka moment answer to your question, Ben, but it's sort of the accumulation of experience and just learning about what works and what doesn't, and getting curious about why.
You mentioned in your book having a eureka moment on a plane with Martin Buber's philosophy and going, oh my gosh, I actually think I got something quite wrong here. Do you want to elaborate and explain?
Yeah. In fact, I usually have a stack of Martin Buber books around. So here's this book I'm talking about. So what happened was, I was on a flight to Europe, and I brought a couple of his books. I think it might have been this other book of his, which is also marvelous, called The Knowledge of Man, and then this one, which is his most famous book, called I Am Thou. So somewhere mid-flight over the Atlantic somewhere, I was reading an I Am Thou. And I Am Thou is one of those books, like a lot of profound books. They're not simple. They sort of seem, this is a very thin book, but it's actually profoundly deep, which means you've got to really work hard when you're reading it to kind of hang on to what he's saying. And I hadn't earlier in my year, I'd kind of read him just really thinly. I'd not really. I sort of had grabbed a few ideas and I thought I understood what he meant. And when I read, and in fact, I even wrote about him like I understood what he meant over the years and talked with people like I understood what he meant.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I read this passage and all of a sudden it started to shatter much of what I'd been thinking. So I'll read it's a really short, I'll read the passage and then I'll tell you why it was so sort of like shattering. Okay.
Yeah.
My worldview up to that point. So this is what he writes. I perceive something. I am sensible of something. I imagine something. I will something. I feel something. I think something. The life of human beings does not consist of all this and the like alone. This and the like together establish the realm of it. Now, okay, that's not going to make sense to listeners alone. Let me tell you why that was revolutionary for me. So I had up till then thought the sort of this key distinction. I still find that this is helpful, but it's limiting in ways that I wasn't alive to until I started to penetrate what Buber was saying. That we can see others as people or see others as objects, for example. And a lot of my earlier work was about how it's better to see people as people than as objects, and here's how you do that. Well, okay, but think about that. So putting it that way, seeing others as objects, that's something I'm thinking in my head, right? Or perceiving. I'm perceiving someone else as a person, let's say. So if I'm perceiving or seeing someone as a person, I would have said to you, fantastic, that's what we're after. But then we come back to Buber's words again, I perceive something. Now let's put that, I perceive someone as a person. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I'm sensible of someone as a person. I imagine someone as a person. I think about someone as a person. And then he says, this and the like together establish the realm of it. I'm like, what? No, this is the realm of person, not of it. And here's what I realized. I didn't realize it immediately at that point, but as I started to dive in now, what I came to discover was this. This was my core misunderstanding on this point. It's that he wasn't making a point simply about the difference between how we see other people, because seeing happens in our heads. He was making about a point about what's happening between people. Okay. And so we can be in relation, we can be in actual genuine encounter and relation with a person. Okay. Or we can be in our heads around a person. And those are not the same thing. And we can be in our heads about others in nice ways and in not so nice ways. Okay. And certainly I would say being in my head about seeing someone else as a person is a way better way to be in my head than try to be in my head seeing them as an object. I mean, that's way better. But it's not the same as actually being out of my head with a person. And so Buber's work is fundamentally about how do we get out of our heads and actually be with people, not just see them in a certain way in our heads,
sure,
but actually be with them differently. That is the relational move, right? So anything I'm doing just in my own little head over here is by definition already individualistic. It's something I myself am doing. But what we do at Withy and what the book gets into is actually the action is actually what's happening between us. But so how do you see what's happening between us? That's one of the challenges in organizations. It's one of the challenges is if you think about an org chart, for example, you see all the names on the chart and, you can manage the people by the, what's happening in each of these boxes and what's happening in each of these teams. And that's all fine. But the most important thing in any organization is actually what's happening between the people and between the boxes and between the teams. And you're not seeing that on the org chart. In fact, you're not really seeing that anywhere. People aren't illuminating that because they haven't even thought to illuminate it because we're already thinking individualistically in terms of thing, pieces, parts, rather than the connectivity between us. So in Withy and in You and We, I dive into, among other things, how can you actually illuminate that space between us? What's happening there? How can you evaluate it? How can you track it? And what do you do about it? Those are some of the issues that I get into.
Yeah, I love this because you mentioned there, this gap, this space in the org chart. And I love this because, we see there is breakage, not so much in the roles that people are playing, but in that gap, right? The relational connection there. And so we really do need to talk about getting out of our own heads and helping people take the first steps. What are some of the first steps for helping someone get out of their head and into that space to make these relationships rich and vibrant?
Well, yeah, so there are a number of things I think that a person can do or that an organization can do. I mean, so let me talk organizationally first, and then I'll talk personally about it. Okay. So in an organization, what we find is that the thing that really is most helpful first is to figure out how to illuminate the space. You can actually see it. Yeah. Because until you can see it and what's not where we want it to be, you don't really feel the motivation to do anything about it necessarily. You just don't know. Yeah. But once you see that, and so I'll give you, so how do you see it? Well, here's one of the ways we help people to see it. We have a way of categorizing levels of connectivity between people. Okay. So we use, and I go through these in You and We use mathematics. Oh, and by the way, let me say this. I wrote You and We as a story too. So this might sound like a bunch of technical stuff, but I wrote this like in the same style as Leadership and Self-Deception and The Anatomy of Peace, which were two prior books that were as stories.
I love that way you write, by the way. It just makes it so much easier to understand.
And you see yourself in the characters, you're pulled along with the story. And I think of all the stories, the story in You and We is my favorite. It's as a story, it's just an arresting story in and of itself, never mind the content that you're learning through. So in the story, what you learn about is you have the lowest level of relational connectivity we call division. And this is where we're obstructing each other, we're getting in each other's way, okay? The next level up is what we call subtraction. And here we're not obstructing each other anymore, but we're resisting each other. So we're kind of going around each other to get things done, not really listening to what you might be saying, that kind of thing. The next level up we call addition. And at the addition level, we're not obstructing anymore. We're not resisting, but we're just kind of doing our own work. We're sort of heads down, blinders on, staying in our own lane, doing our own functional thing. And we're all doing that maybe across an organization, kind of doing our thing. That's addition. Next level up is multiplication, where now people are coming up out of only their functional focus, and they're now working in a way where they're collaborating with others. That's the fourth level, multiplication, the collaboration, cooperation. But that leaves the top level, which is really the most amazing level at all. And that's the level that actually Buber's specific work really illuminates of how you access that. That's what we call compounding. And that's when actually, it's not only that we're cooperating across the divides of our organization or our roles in a family or whatever, it's that there's this melting down of the walls between us. And so there's this integration of what we're doing in each of our minds and hearts. We're so integrated that, I mean, like, your Kaylee, your success is as important to me as mine, right? And Ben, yours too. I mean, I'm not making distinctions between my success and your success anymore, right? Because we're so tethered together in this deep way. This is compounding. So one way, when we measure this space between people in organizations, we utilize those ways of thinking about gradations of connectivity. And so that's one way is let's see it. But then if you can, and I do this in the book too, help people to understand what are the differences between those levels of connectivity. And in this sort of relationship, is this level good enough, right? Or should it be somewhere else? And so, so you give people an understanding of what those actually mean, okay? And then the tools on, okay, so if I want to go from addition up to multiplication, what does that require? I mean, what is that? How do you do it? If you want to go from multiplication up to compounding, what's that? What's different in that move than just the move to now cooperating, collaborating with each other, which is the multiplication move? So that's, that's what we do. Now, we can get into specifics, if you want to on this call too. Well, what are some of the specific things then? How do you make like that move? What's key when you're making this move over the threshold to compounding? That's a whole topic in and of itself. In fact, that's the book. I wrote the book in 4 parts. And part 1 is around essentially what you might think of as the laws of relation. There's 4 laws of relation because it's about waking us up to this reality of relation. It's a bit like it's like waking fish up to water. I mean, fish aren't thinking about water. And we live in this relational net always, fundamentally. In fact, it makes up who we are, but we don't even realize it. So part one is about how that's the case. Then part two is, well, okay, given that that's the case, how do you start thinking this way? How do you start tackling things relationally in terms of connectivity between? And that's where we'll get into like the levels of relation that we talked about, and different ways to see that. And then and then part three is, well, okay, how do you make this bold move to this upper level of relation? And so part three of the book is entirely about that. And then part four is about what you might think of as what we think of as the relational leap. So it's, you and I as individuals, we can get a lot of things done. But when individuals actually converge in this sort of level 5 kind of a way, what happens is a leap in in performance, a leap on any measure. And so part 4 is about that relational leap happening. You see it happening, you feel it happening because it's happening in the characters in the book. It's happening in the reader as well because we've identified ourselves with characters of the book. So that's how the book unfolds.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but when you talk about taking that leap, you also reference how one of the ways that this is accelerated or multiplied is by leveraging the differences of the people that are now working together. Because so often, in order for us to get the synergy or the harmony, you've got to. We often think we've got to be the same, right? And what you're saying is actually quite the opposite. It's like, no, we don't.
No, we don't. In fact, by definition, there's no such thing as harmony when all there is the same, right? I mean,
exactly.
Harmony requires difference.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's one of the bedrocks of relation is that in order to be relation, there has to be difference there. I mean, north is in relation to south because of the difference. If all there was north, there actually would be no south. I mean, it's like they actually both emerge out of the being together, but the difference there. So this imperative actually of honoring difference, it's at the core of any real change not change, any real transformation. I can change just by working on my same old self and getting a little bit better, and that's great. But it turns out real leaps beyond, real innovations, real transformations, I can't do that on my own. It's all in intersection with difference. In fact, I use I use a metaphor for this. It's a really powerful metaphor about water. So let's imagine, for example, that Ben, you and I, let's say that we are hydrogen atoms, okay? And Kaylee, you're an oxygen atom, okay? And look, the world needs oxygen. So you can just keep being an oxygen atom. That's perfectly fine, okay? And the world needs hydrogen, and we can keep doing that. That's fine too. But if all we do is all the hydrogen hangs out with the hydrogen and all the oxygen hangs out with the oxygen, there's no water, okay, right? So, but when you have two of us, two hydrogens get together with an oxygen atom, and we open ourselves to each other. Now, there's a chemical way that this happens, but when we open ourselves to each other, all of a sudden, this conjoining of differences gives birth to this entirely new thing. I mean, water. I mean, what are you talking? If we're hydrogen atoms having a chat about what's possible in the world, we would never dream up this thing called water. I mean, it's way beyond. It's way beyond us. Yeah. Same for hydrogen, right? So that's a really powerful, for me, metaphor. And I work through metaphors a lot. In the book, there's a number of metaphors, but this is one of them. For keeping really clear on the importance of difference. Because let's say, for example, that we get together in this water molecule now. And let's say, Ben, you and I, we think, yeah, but you know what? Kaylee, she really needs to be hydrogen. I mean, she's got to change hydrogen. Well, okay. So if we were successful in that project and Haley changed to be hydrogen, the water molecule would disappear. Yeah. We actually need her to hold on to her hydrogenness. She needs us to hold on to our oxygen nature. And not only that, though, because that alone can keep us separate, and come together and open ourselves in such a way where we can discover possibilities that are impossible alone.
Yeah.
And that's, you just can't do that without difference. And that all happens in relation. All of it does.
Yeah, massively. And I think certainly at the core of that is trust, right? Because in order for the water to come into existence, we've got to become the best version of ourselves and feel comfortable enough in this space that I can bring all of me to the table versus thinking that the best way that I can show up is to emulate you. So, we want to emulate the good in others often, but I think it's really about, for the sake of becoming the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we differentiate ourselves. We actually become more differentiated because of relation. I witnessed this. I've got twin daughters, and they're amazing. They're both amazing, and they're identical twins, and they're entirely different. Wow. And they're entirely different partly because they differentiated themselves against each other, because we're not just identical twins. We're individual, right?
Yeah, so we're individuals too. Yeah.
It's this collective context in which we actually become more of whoever we are. And you see this in organizations, or you see this, I mean, if you're like me, whether it's in a formal organization or just sort of in a social space generally, I end up doing way more if there are other people involved and I feel like they're counting on me or they believe in me or whatever, than I would possibly do on my own. It's the call of others and honoring that, which actually I become. Now this is where the line between individualistic approach and relational approach you can miss it, because you can say I become more of myself, but actually that isn't quite true, because notice the self that I'm becoming is already a function of the other people who are inviting me there, right? I mean, so other people are in my development and I'm in them. We're not separates. There's no one on this earth that conjured themselves here alone. We all come through the intersection of others. I mean, quite literally, physically, and then emotionally, and how we develop and whatnot. We're all results of our intersections. And we are, you look at me, here as this an embodied person. Yeah, but this embodied person is actually a collection of sort of, I'm like a ball of relations, all the relations and all these things relating with other collections of relation that are called Kaylee and Ben, right? I mean, that's kind of what's happening. And we leave our influence all over the place as we're spinning and intersecting, and we show up differently because of who we're intersecting with. We show up as different people because we are quite literally different. In fact, we have a little thing. My wife and I sometimes joke that you're probably not like this. You're a lot better person, but better people. But like in an airport, I get really kind of like self-concerned at an airport. Like I never check luggage, so I'm always worried about my own, carry-ons, whether I'm going to have space for my bag. So I'm the guy who, whatever like group I'm loading, and I want to be at the front of that tranche of people, right? And so my wife and I kind of joke that's airport Jim. Okay, that's actually not how I am in other contexts, but there I am. Well, quite often. That's airport Jim. Now, actually, when I get on the plane, airplane Jim's a bit different than airport Jim. And that's different than working Jim and being on the golf course Jim. And so we sort of have this idea of we're sort of this static being, but actually what's true at the subatomic level, which there's nothing static. All there is things that are coming into being as they intersect in relation. That's at the heart of everything. That's all that exists, it turns out. That's what we're like too. We're bunches of different people, depending on who we're intersecting with in what context. And then we have a narrative we tell ourselves about who Jim is. That's sort of a story that stitches all that difference together.
For sure.
Yeah. Does that help you get out of your head a little bit? This concept of fixed identity, right? Where we think this is who I am. And yet you just kind of really beautifully articulated we are multiple people based on the circumstances and environment that we're in and who we're interacting with. Does that help us get out of our head a little bit in those relationships as we understand, our identity or my identity is not fixed or limited, but that it's actually something that is changeable, evolutionary?
I think so. Now, I find when I'm working in organizations, I don't speak that way because I don't want to get psychological. So
Sure.
we're not talking that way, but here's how that shows up. Because I think you're putting your finger on something, Ben, that's exactly right. See, it used to be like for most of my career, I would work with people in an individualistic way. I would try to get them to open up to how they might be a problem themselves, for example, and therefore see other people differently. And that's all really positive work. It's really helpful. It has its limitations, but it's helpful. And so in the middle of that, if you're coming into a situation that's a difficult one, let's say in an organization, and there's a conflict situation, for example, then what you have to do, see, what's actually happening in a case like that, to put it in the terms you were using, Ben, is everyone's sort of believing in fixed identity, like which the fixed identity, one version of that is Ben's a problem. Here's who Ben is. Here's how he always shows up. And usually, not always, because it can go flip the other way, but usually the person who's telling the story is saying, and my fixed identity is, I'm the one who's not the problem here. Okay.
Exactly.
I'm the one who's really helpful. And Ben's the guy who doesn't realize that, right? That's all like thinking about, that's a thing. That's all what Buber's saying. That's all in your head. These are narratives and thoughts and all these impressions. They're all head-based. Which, by the way, a lot of good things that happen in our heads. He's not saying don't be in your head ever. He's just saying just realize that's not the same thing as being out in a relationship. So what we do at Withy now is different. So in a situation like that one, I'm not coming in trying to get you to change how you're seeing yourself or how you're seeing the other person, which you're already going to resist change there anyway. Instead, we illuminate the space between us. Okay. And for example, using the levels of relation we were just talking about, doesn't take long where people can start to think intelligently about, well, I think we're probably operating at a subtraction level in this work relationship right here, or a division level. This feels like maybe addition. And we might be off by one level. It's rare that we're off by more. Usually people basically see the situation the same, and there's no resistance there. And that is by definition fluid. There's nothing fixed about that. There's not a fixed me and a fixed you. It's like, here's where this is currently at. Well, then the question is, well, can we afford in this work relationship to be operating at subtraction? I mean, strategically, does that make sense for our business? Well, in most cases, the answer to that question is going to be, no, that doesn't make sense for our business.
Of course.
Then the question, so what are we going to do about that? So you see, everything's fluid. And what's really fascinating, among other things, is I'll end up changing things. You'll end up changing things. All of that will all be sort of very, very fluid and changeable in the context of focusing on the thing between us, not on focusing on you and me, where we're already locked down there. I already know you're the problem and I'm the one that's good. That's all locked up. This relation, that's not locked up. Neither of us thinks it's locked up, and we can start working on it. And it's just a way faster, more powerful, and for that matter, more cost-effective way to tackle challenges between people and organizations.
Yeah, I love that so much, because so often the barrier to change is rooted in ego. That scenario you described happens all the time. The problem clearly isn't me, it's clearly you, right? So somewhere else, it's always somewhere else. The finger always goes outwards. Yeah, and that often means that the other person always gets defensive, right? They need to protect the ground they're on, and especially in a corporate environment, because your livelihood is on the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that type of stuff, there's a lot at stake, not just your reputation, but everything comes with this. So it's really kind of removing the barrier of ego and saying, hey, love you, love me, but the space in between, that piece needs work.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to view that and go, you know what? I don't want to work on that space.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. In fact, I've not encountered one person yet, Ben, who's reacted that way. Yeah. No, we're good. It's like,
it's impossible.
It's impossible. And so you're right. You avoid the traps of ego, which are traps in our heads, because we're not thinking about in our heads. Okay.
Yeah.
It's this thing here. And away we go. And then, so it just opens up all kinds of really cool possibility.
Yeah, I love the idea too of it just being fluid. It kind of takes the pressure off yourself, your own ego, and then everyone else, the perception of everyone else. Because a lot of the times I feel like, I don't know if you guys hear this, I hear this all the time. That's just the way they are. And it's like, oh, well.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that, right?
Yeah. I mean, Bill, like, he's just like that. It's like, well, Bill can wake up any day and choose he wants to be different, you know? And like you said, working on illuminating the space in between, you can both kind of work on that. And I love the analogy of airport, Jim. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And it's just you. I also have airport Kaylee. And Ben and I travel in a couple weeks, so I'll let you know if there's airport Ben too.
By the way, what we're talking about now, so it's true. This is applicable not just interpersonally in our personal lives or in our organizational life. This is a societal issue. I mean, think about the political issue right now is very much about people are so convinced that they know who other people are in all directions. And it's all sort of locked down that way, and they're wrong and we're right. And that's and what's being neglected is the space between. That's not happening. If we're not meeting in the between. And because partly we'll show up differently with each other. It's easy to show up in our tribes in a certain kind of way because we're all just rallying with our tribes.
Yeah.
That's tribe Jim. Okay. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
But there's meeting with someone else with another view of things, Jim, hopefully. And that's a different kind of experience. And that when that happens, actually, one of the things that's interesting is that looks like an individual meeting. Let's see, Kaylee, let's say you and I come from different, I mean, this could be political views, religious views, whatever views. Let's say we now meet an actual meeting, and it's an open one. Okay. That looks like it's two individuals meeting, but actually, I'm not just an individual for all the reasons we've been talking about. I'm a collection of relations. So I'm actually bringing that tribe with me. All my tribes are also there meeting. That's the way tribes actually reach out and meet other tribes, is through the individual nodes who represent the tribe that's alive in them coming and mingling together. And that creates this space where there can be some joining and expanding of experience and identity and whatnot. I think it's if I could say what one single thing is most missing in our social discourse right now that's putting everything at risk, I'd say it's exactly this. We're not actually at all attending to the space between. We all have our arguments on our sides, which is great because we need oxygen and we need hydrogen. Like, okay. So, but we haven't figured out the space between where oxygen and hydrogen can come together, still be oxygen and hydrogen, and really get in relationship in such a way to figure out what new thing have we not been seeing?
Yeah,
what new place have we not gotten to? Because we're just gathered in our sameness right now, which is just going to be more of the same by definition.
Yeah, it's comfortable, it's convenient, but it's not necessarily what's best.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's wrong. I mean, it's fine to hang out with people like yourself. It's fine too. It's not, and like Boober's saying too, there's nothing wrong with being in your head. There's a lot of great things that happen in your head. I love ideas. I spend a lot of my life batting around ideas in my head. It's just that that's not the same as actually being present with people. And we need to be clear on that difference and not neglect the latter. Because if we do, we end up losing what's actually fundamentally human about us, which is the ability to connect.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book some strategies to help people that are navigating difficult relationships. Right, you talked about breaking, blocking, bonding, and bridging. And because some people do get locked in, don't they, right? So they find themselves in a difficult dynamic. They're not measuring the gap. They're pitting against each other, but they often get locked in for a period of time. Help me understand those four components.
So what those are about, there's that five. I'm going to add a fifth component there. So it's just that one of the components is so big, the top one, that it ends up meriting a whole part of the book, not just a chapter.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so remember these 5 levels of relation or connectivity we were talking about, from division up to compounding. Well, that's, if you're looking at it from a relational viewpoint, what's happening between people. Now, you can look at it, but what's happening with one person? So one person who's coming into a relationship, what are they bringing to that space? And that's these terms you were just referring to, that I'm getting at that question with those terms. So for example, and these, by the way, are informed partly by the really monumental work in a book called Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. It came out a couple decades ago about how we're sort of separating, as a society. And he talked about three different kinds of what he called, there's social capital that we're either sort of adding to social capital between us or taking away from it. And he talked about three levels, that there's breaking, bonding, and bridging is what he talked about. Now I've added two more to those. And so you got breaking, if you think about, and so I'll explain how it works. So when I show up in a breaking way, I'm contributing. Now, it's not only me, because there's another side here too, but in a relationship, I'm contributing toward a division level of relationship. When I'm showing up breaking, I'm putting things between us, I'm putting wedges and that kind of thing. We see this a lot in our political space. So that's breaking, and then the bonding. Well, breaking and
Blocking.
Blocking is the one. It's how I'm showing up when I'm contributing to the subtraction level, resistant sort of relationship. I'm typically showing up in a blocking kind of way. I'm not really listening, right? Yeah. They want to, Katie wants to go, so I sort of block those things, and I block myself around her. And then bonding it corresponds to addition in social space. So, and bonding sometimes can be very positive. That is, I'm bonding with my own folks, my own people. And look, for people who have been discriminated against, for example, through history, bonding is what's kept them alive. So sure. That's a very important thing. But it's really important, I think, to recognize that if all we're doing is bonding with our own, that's all we're doing. And the divides of society then are alive and well. So the next level up, remember, relationally, was multiplication, where we're cooperating. So what's our part in that? That's bridging. We show up in a bridging way toward others. And then the top level, which is the one that merits a whole part of the book, is the move. How do we show up at the compounding, a relationship that's compounding? What's my part in that? How do I show up in that way? And that's what we call expanding. That I get larger than just myself. My concerns are larger anymore than just my own used to be. And this, by the way, you get a feel for this. Everyone's had a feel for this in their lives in one way or another. But as a parent, for example, anyone who's had children knows that once you have kids, for example, all of a sudden these little beings, all of a sudden you love them as much as you loved yourself. I mean, your heart actually grows, right? It expands. They actually enter you. It's not just that there's this little child over there. It's like they're part of you now. You're bigger. Your circle of concern is bigger than it used to be. Your love's larger than it used to be, all those things. So this is expanding. So it's like every time that sort of my whatever my level of concern is, when it expands to include more additional other kinds of people than it has before, I'm showing up in an expanding kind of way. I actually call that in the book, in part 4 of the book, I call that the next we. So wherever I am, one thing that can be helpful to help me sort of in the trajectory toward this growth is to be thinking, what's the next we here? So I've got my group, my team.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got my oxygen team. What's the next we? Where's the hydrogen atoms? They're not yet part of this. And to think organizationally, to think strategically, to get people thinking strategically, organizationally, but who do our next we's need to be? Who do they need to include that aren't currently included? Yeah. And that way you end up dissolving a lot of the divisions, the lines, the things that have been keeping us apart. Even in ways we might be fine, we might even be friendly with each other, but still we're not integrated yet. Yeah. Until we make that move.
Well, let's take an example of what might look like bonding, but actually isn't. Because sometimes you'll get division in organizations because companies can sometimes, or even teams, right, where it's a corporate environment or a field environment like what we have with the organization that we operate in, where people are sometimes, or groups, working in silos. So, I might get a bond, or I might bond as part of a marketing team, and then the marketing team might bond in this way, but then actually might be doing something by pitting us versus them. So we are kind of bonding, But in reality, we're also blocking.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're bonding internally in our team and blocking, for example, toward other teams. Or worse, we might even be breaking toward other teams.
Yeah.
You can even do this on whole organizational levels. Let's say you really work on your connectivity across your organization. And so as an organization internally, let's say we're at the highest level, we're compounding. Well, that still leaves our relations with everyone outside the organization. What about our customers, for example?
Yeah.
Are they still outside us? Because to the degree they are, we're not yet compounding with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is it still us and their customers? And how would our business be different if we didn't think of our customers as outside our business, but actually inside our business? What would be different about our business? How do we work differently? As an example, you see, that's exactly right. So we have different levels of relation going in different directions, just like there's different gyms, right? There's airport gym, et cetera. There's different teams too, depending on who we're interacting with and we're internally versus externally.
Yeah. I like when you said that when my circle of concern expands to bring you in. Yeah, so now all of a sudden I'm thinking more in an expansive way, versus the lesser way we were just talking about. So, I think, we often battle this us and them experience in organizations. And the way to break that down is to open yourself up to expand and bring those other people into the circle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So bonding isn't just here. It's also every iteration. It's every interaction.
Yeah. And then it's not bonding anymore. Then it's actually, now you're moving out, you're bridging.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can bridge and then just bond in that group. And there's still the next we that's still waiting outside. And we might still be bonding here, but it's always movement is, and look, this is as an organizational strategy, this is so helpful. This is also the way the world and universe has been built. I mean, everything you see, I'm looking out in this gorgeous sort of scene here in the woods of DC, right here with trees and plants and whatnot. Everything that looks here to there, it's all built from relation, from the smallest atoms coming together and those molecules have formed with other things. And and out of that has emerged everything that we see. So everything you see is sort of a testament of the importance of the next we. Yeah. That's where all new innovation, that's where all new growth comes from. That's the water move, right? That's the move from, okay, we're oxygen and hydrogen. That's good. We need them both. To, but what happens if we actually open to each other and boom, now we discover something that's really grand, right?
Yeah. I almost want to go back to the beginning. It's so fun delving into this, the book and this whole philosophy. And I'm excited to, but I want to make sure that our listeners get a chance to connect with you and the book. But I want to bring it back to ground zero for just a moment here. Because right at the beginning of the conversation and at the beginning of the book, you share something that I think is really, really important, that change doesn't really begin until we recognize the need for it, right? And we've got this thing kind of working, this uninformed ignorance where I don't know that I don't know.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I don't feel a need to change. And you use some great metaphors, and I think there's a couple, I'm not sure which one is best to highlight this, but there's a chance for self-reflection, I think, for the listeners here. Yeah. At the front end of the book, you use a great example of tic-tac-toe, and also Surrette's pointillism, his style of painting, which kind of shows through those little dots, actually, we're all connected here.
Yeah.
And help me cast a light on this for the viewers that are listening here.
So in You and We, in part one of the book, there's 7 chapters in part one. The last 4 chapters, each one of them introduces one, what I call law of relation. And I introduce each of those laws of relation through a metaphor so that to make them really understandable and intuitive, because you can get bogged down. We're talking about some stuff that can be really deep, but if you get the right kind of metaphor, all of a sudden it's like, boom, okay, I see it.
Yeah.
So let's start with one you mentioned, the tic-tac-toe metaphor. So if we played a game of tic-tac-toe, let's say I go corner, you go middle, then I take another move, we make all these moves. Well, it turns out that no move makes sense by itself. They're all contextual. I mean, you went middle because I first went corner, which means that my going in corner is actually inside your move of you going middle. It's not That's not an independent move
It's not
on
independent.
your part.
Yeah.
My action is actually part of your action. And in fact, I went corner to start with because I anticipated what I thought you might do and all things considered. So you're already in the middle, even in the way I started. So what's interesting about this really simple game of tic-tac-toe is it illustrates that every move is relational. There is no independent move. But what's helpful about it as a metaphor is that's true of life. That's true of us. There is no non-relational space. Everything that's happening is relational.
Yeah.
So the law of relation number one is all you see is relation. Now, let me illustrate that another way. So let's say, Kaylee, so here I'm looking at Kaylee, okay? And I can think, well, there's Kaylee. But it turns out I'm not seeing Kaylee, okay? I'm not seeing Ben. You're not seeing Jim. We all think we are. But what we're actually seeing is, see, if you realize it, I'm the one who's seeing Kaylee. There's Kaylee over there, but I'm seeing Kaylee. So when I'm thinking of I'm seeing Kaylee, I'm already in the middle of the seeing. I think I'm seeing someone independent of me. No, because I'm the one who's actually seeing. What I'm seeing is not independent of me at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing Kaylee. I'm seeing my intersection with Kaylee. I'm seeing the relation between us. All I'm seeing is relation. That's true of everything. That's true of us. That's true at the subatomic level. It's true at the day-to-day human level. That's what we're up to. In fact, over the last 100 years, I would say the most important discovery in science by far is the discovery that we're never seeing or measuring things that are independent of ourselves. All we're ever measuring or seeing is our own interactions with what it is we're observing. That's it. Werner Heisenberg, a great physicist, was famous for a lot of things, but one was this quote. He said, when we're measuring nature, we're not measuring nature. We're measuring nature's sort of response to the way we're inquiring about nature, right? So again, all we're seeing is relation. That's it. Now, as a leader, if you understand that, and that changes everything what you do in an organization. It's not because we're always thinking of those people over there, these people over there, here. No, it's everyone's in response. And what I'm seeing, those people over there, I'm already in the seeing. So what does it say about me that I'm seeing in that way? I mean, these are all relational sorts of questions that you never get to if we're thinking individualistically, which we all do in a knee-jerk way without even thinking about it. Especially in the West. Philosophically, it's baked into our worldviews.
Yeah. Now, we had a conversation the other day, and you said something that just, I think, gave great context to this, that work that you're involved in. You mentioned, for like millennia, our strength of showing up was really relying on our own physical prowess, right? And until industrialization came on the scene, and that just changed everything. And as a result, we've got these machines now that can do the work of 1,000 men, and so on and so forth. So the quality of our contribution now suddenly pivots to it's all about the mental space. Yeah. And then you mentioned AI and the evolution there. Walk me through the conclusion of this, because I want this better in your words than my own.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So we're in the middle of a revolution, actually, a shift in eras here that AI is sort of in the middle of. But it's reflected in the shift you just described, Ben. So just as human beings, our sort of value we brought to work shifted from physical labor, from our bodies to our minds, because machines got better at doing most of the body stuff. So the comparative advantage for human beings shifted to using our brains. Now, AI is getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So it's taking over more and more of the brain space. So that leaves the question, well, then what's left for humans to do in their work if machines are doing the brain work that we've been doing for the last century or so better than we are? It's the same question. What's left to do with if we don't have body work anymore? What's our work? We could have dreamt up the brain economy back when we were in the middle of the body economy. Yeah. But so what is next? Well, I like to think of three parts of what it means to be a human. There's the physical part of us. That was our body. That's the body work economy. Okay. Yeah. That was radically changed by machines. And so now that moved us to our brains, our minds. So our bodies and then our minds, that's getting undercut right now. So what's on the other side of that? And I would suggest it's our hearts. Now, by heart, I'm not speaking of the physical organ. I'm thinking about our ability to connect, the depth. We have interiors as human beings. Machines are bits. They're X's and O's. It's going to be a little bit different when we get into quantum computing, because quantum computing is relational by nature. But even so, human beings have this deep sort of human relational ability the machines don't have. It's one of the reasons why we'll take offense at human beings over doing the same thing that a machine might. A machine makers think it's just a dumb machine. It doesn't know any better. A human does something. We're making assumptions about what's going on in their hearts. They must not care about us. Yeah. They're going blah, 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 blah. And so we erupt in some kind of a problem. So people don't realize it. I mean, we realize it, I think, because there's this huge shift happening. But one way to capture what the shift is we're ushered out of the brain economy and into the relational economy in terms of what humans' primary worth is going to. Now, when you're talking to CEOs of organizations, I ask them this question: what percentage because this shift is already happening. If I say, what percentage of your work are you spending doing body work? In most companies, it's like 0. Get myself to the office, maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How about brain work? Still a lot of brain work going, but the higher you go in the organization, the higher the percentage will be when you ask them, how about relational work? How much of your work is relational work between human beings? And that's the biggest number by far already. That's where we're going. That's already the highest valued work for human beings, because those are the people who are being paid the most, the ones who are spending most of the time on the interpersonal, sort of the relational work. But that's where all of us are going to be forced to, most of us, because machines are going to do our brain stuff better than we are. So what are we going to do? Because if all we do is bring our brain stuff and we're lousy on the heart level, well, machines are lousy on the heart level too. So they can take that job. Okay. But they won't take the job that involves the real heart connection, because they can't. Yeah. So that's the way I view the way this transition we're in the middle of.
Yeah, and I think that's why what we've been talking about today is so profoundly important, right? So for anyone that's listening, whether it's needing to work on my own relationship with myself or my shifting sense of identity, improving that, my relationship with my peers, my friends, my work colleagues, leaders that have organizations and teams, all of this has massive relevance. And to your point, there is a growing relevance in the years to come, because that's where we're going to shine the best in the next economy. Yeah. So with that being said, Jim, we're coming to the end of our time here, frustratingly, and I think we need to do a few more of these.
Yeah.
But where could people follow along if they want to catch you online, get access to your book when it comes out?
Okay, so a couple things. So You and We hits the shelves on September 16th. Mm-hmm. They can go to youandwe.com, just spell out the words youandwe.com, and you'll be right in the middle of all that. My corporate website is withy.com. It's the word with 3 I's after that.com for the corporate stuff. But if you go to youandwe.com, that'll be easy to remember. You'll be able to find your way to Withy if you want to get there as well.
Awesome.
We're also running this. It depends on when this episode is going to come out, but we're running promotions for people who, both individuals and organizations, who order pre-orders of the book. So, if you pre-order the book and get us the your receipt, whatever, on Amazon, we'll put you for free into a book club I'm doing, 4 sessions, for example, no charge for that. Awesome. Organizations can get crazy things right now. If they want to order some bulk, can get basically me to come for free while they're doing bulk orders. These are possible just over the next 3 months, these sorts of opportunities. But if you go to withy.com or to youandwe.com, you'll be able to stay current on everything that's happening. And as we lead up to that launch, September 16th, I think people will be hearing more and more about the book.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we look forward to doing our part and spreading the word, because it's a game changer. It really is.
It is. I think so too.
So excited for you, Jim. And we'll drop all those links in the description so everyone can find you.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's been fun. What a fun conversation.
Oh, fantastic. Seriously. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And by the way, just notice how relational it is, right? Things happen in the coming together.
Yeah.
That's where the magic is.
Yeah, it really is. It's water right here.
Yeah, it is. And if you're listening too, it's so relational too. So thank you so much for joining us, Jim. Such a great conversation with you.
Thank you.
Cool.